Hi there, this is part 3 of the Building Mountain Roads in Eastern Tennessee. And if you haven't had a chance to see parts 1 and 2, I'm going to put a link up here for you to get to those if you want to. Now, I would like to share a couple things with you just before we get started, because I didn't share them in parts 1 and 2. Now, the first is, while I'm no expert in doing this, I didn't come at this without any reference point. I used this guide right here, and I'll put a link in the description. And if you take a look at the documents that are contained, or the chapters that are contained within this document, you'll see a lot of really good information. I suggest you pause here for just a second and look at the topics, and you'll understand the basis by which I started building these roads. There really is a critical amount of information here. If you're going to try and make roads in the mountains, you really need to understand how to fill in a side, the compaction ratios, the slope you need for how you're going to drive on there. Then the last thing that is also important, and it may not be last, is you need to understand the kind of soil you have. And so I use this website here, and if you just reach out and try the site, I think you'll find that it's an extremely useful tool for understanding what you're going to find when you dig in the ground. Where we ended in part 2, I was just approaching this platform so that I could get some of the trees that were up in the corner, because as I was riding on the ridge line coming up, the slope was changing, and I had to go up and turn at the same time. So this is my first real big bend that has to do an elevation change, and you're going to see the mess I got into and the work I had to go through to get to the final approach to climb the mountain. You can see that that's kind of a continuation of this wall, right? But it's got a curve. So I'm going to keep piling in the surface material, dark stuff, over here, so that I have room to gain the elevation needed to take that tree down. We already took part of it down, but I got to get elevation so that I can get on par with this thing. And then we're going to tip it over is if I can get the excavator down here. And come at it this way and tip it down that way. It is almost hard to describe, even though you're seeing it in this video, the scale of this project. It's just insane. That piece of equipment, absolutely required. Now, I'm not going to say cutting my way through this side and going up this turn was easy, because it wasn't. And one of the things you'll notice later is that I made a mistake and I turned too early, and I actually had to come back and cut my way back down. But what I was doing is I was following these landmarks. You'll notice this dead tree was in a couple other ones. And what you'll also see here is I had a lot of trees to remove, all of which had to be taken down to the sawmill. I didn't leave any of this brush up here. I didn't leave any of these logs up here, and I certainly didn't want to throw them over the side. And as you can see, I did get it eventually cleaned up. And while there were a lot of trees, they all made it down to the sawmill eventually. I tried to make it a point to stack them in this corner so that they could be easily removed later and that they would be out of my way. Remember I said I had to come back and I had to widen this corner? This is why. I've got my push blade down really far so that I don't slide as I'm digging out this corner, because it was still so steep that it just didn't feel right. I knew that a car in two-wheel drive would never be able to make it up this slope. You know, I could get up it in tracks with the excavator, but there was no way I was going to be able to drive up here. So this took a lot of finesse to get right. The first thing I want you to notice in this frame is that this road is really narrow at this point. And that's because the stuff to your left, that hill and tree and that little bush there, those have to go away. And the reason they have to go away is because as I was starting to go down this hill, or rather come up this hill, it was so steep that I knew that that bend had to go much closer to the property line, which means it had to shift left of this screen so that I could get every bit of elevation before I made the turn. It seemed like that was going to be my only option for getting the grading right so that it would be an easy drive to get up the top of the hill. I worked and reworked this bend and dug at it until I got it to where it felt like it was going to be a natural turn in a road that was also going up in elevation. And while I was doing that, I was also digging away at the hill, going up further to try and get an idea of what the final approach was going to look like to try and get up that last piece to the ridge line.
There's the top. There's my boundary marker. Sweep up, cut across. We should be able to make it.
Now, when I was first doing my Pablo Picasso, holding my hand out and scoping out the elevation change, if you look here to the left of the excavator, you'll see there's a little embankment built here. I knew that I needed to get to a certain elevation in order to hit my marks for the elevation I wanted to be at for when I got to the top of the hill. And so I spent probably several weeks carving out this particular area to get all of the dirt off, and then the substrate that was kind of silty off, and then replace it with rock so that I had a good base for where the road was going to eventually be. But in doing that, I discovered something else. As you'll notice, the lighter colored rock that's in these pictures here, these are rock outcroppings, which if you think about pictures you've seen of mountains where they have an inverted V and they go down and they're really jagged, that's the part of the rock that just resists any kind of erosion or wear, and it's because it is so freaking hard. I attacked this stuff with my hammer, my hydraulic hammer, and it just did not want to break. The further down I went, the harder it got. So I scraped away as much material as I could, chipped away as much as I possibly could, and then came back and understood that that was going to be my final elevation. But it was just unbelievably hard. And it was one of those things that actually made me start to question whether or not I had bitten off more than I could chew. And so, I'm debating, what do I got to do to get through this rock? Do I got to get some gunpowder and blast it out? Do I got to hire a blasting crew? What is going to be the nightmare scenario that keeps me awake at night? And believe me, there were a lot of them. It had even gotten to the point where I was asking my daughter and my wife, do you think I'm crazy? Am I crazy for doing this? I mean, I don't know normal people that take on something like this. This isn't where I grew up in a construction industry and I'd been in an excavator my whole life. I'd run an excavator a few times. I owned a mini excavator, but I'd never owned one personal like this size, right? I'd rented them occasionally for some work on my Florida property, but I'd never done anything this crazy. Or should I say this extreme. But I had convinced my wife to buy this property, right? And we're talking probably 10 years of saving and investing and manipulating money to get to the point where we could do this. And so failure is really not an option, right? I mean, how do I tell my wife I can't do this? Anyway, I'm looking at all this rock, right? I'm looking at this rock ledge in particular, and I'm just hammering at it with the hydraulic hammer, and it's not breaking. And so I'm getting little pieces off it. I'm getting dust off of it. So you can see I've spent a lot of time in this area because I've built a good platform here. Anyway, the long and short of this story is I went back to Florida and I bought one of those jackhammers, like one of the big ones. And it's a 70-pounder. And I bought 2 chipping hammers and I bought a concrete saw and a bunch of blades because I thought to myself, you know what, no matter what, even if I got to do it at 4 inches at a time, I'm going to get through this rock. I'm going to break it. I'm going to get it down to grade that I need for the road. I'm going to make this happen. Because failure is just not an option. Now, the road going over the top has been a real challenge because I needed to get deep into this corner to go as high as I could on this particular run up here so that when I made the final approach to the hill, I'd have less of a climb and I'd have more flexibility for dealing with problems. So I wanted to go up into this corner just a little bit more, but this outcropping slowed me down. So I'm like, okay, I can pretty much chase it
up this way and then cut over this way. Because over here there's a lot of rock that's outcropping and it climbs quick. So I need to make this turn in here if I can. So the sooner I can get up and over, the better. So one of the problems has been getting elevation to get to the top of this material because I don't want to pull dirt down if I don't have to. So what I've been doing is I've successively been building roadways to gain elevation, tearing off this corner as high as I could go. Erosion will close that up over time, and I'll fill in what I have to in order to climb up this hill to get to these trees. Yesterday, I took out the lower part of the road and shifted it inward. So it used to be out here, you can see where it's very dark on the edge. It still has topsoil. Where am I? Right here, topsoil. Then it gets down into this lower band that is a cross between rock and dirt, and then it goes straight to rock. That was spread out over this way, giving me as much reach as I could to reach into this corner and up. Now that I've shifted the road over, I can take that material that's down here, bring it up, and I've got all my road base and large rocks on the outside. There's like a retaining wall, and then pretty much solid rock from what I've chipped off to gain my elevation to go up and over that rock. I've been chipping away at it quite a bit, but if I can get it down another foot, then I'll have a better elevation, not quite matching this outcropping, but maybe a little lower. So maybe if I only take 2 feet off of that, I'll still have the raised bank on this side and just carry it up. So we're trying. This is where my road work is right now. This particular outcropping, this one, they're really hard. Very soon I'm going to break out the concrete saw and start sawing into it at 4-inch increments. But for now, I want to clean this up and see what it looks like when I'm done. Okay. Video is I'm building this road. I break off the biggest pieces I can with the hammer, and I spread them out on what I think is a level playing field. I break them down from the hillside. I'm just almost finished doing that right now. And then I spread them out. And anything that's too big, I'll hit with the hammer. And it made me think, maybe that's how the Romans built their roads. They had, all this rock in as a base. And so if it's good enough for the Romans, it's good enough for me. Their roads have lasted thousands of years. I think this will work. And it's creating a hell of a base. So there's no topsoil. Everywhere I've dug until I've hit rock. There's my auxiliary road. You can see the dirt line. This is all built on rock, and I think that it's going to settle really well. Now, the other thing I think is really cool is, as I hit stuff with the hammer, it creates small gravel and sand, which, as it turns out, collects at the edge of where I'm working, right? So I've started digging this trench, and I'm taking the material and I'm pouring it on top of the rocks, and I'm planning on spreading that out, and then it should look like a dirt road, but have all the qualities of a rock road. So I'm going to shoot a video of the stages on this, and I just wanted to get this one in before I got too far on and made progress. Now, I'm not saying I'm scared, okay? Because I've been doing this for a while. But let's look at this view for a second. I am literally on the edge of a mountain, building a road. There's the first flag, where I figured I would cross into here. And there's my next one. I am literally right on target for where I had planned this road.
Now I'm guessing the casual observer can probably see that there's something missing in this frame. It's the window glass. Yep. It's amazing how fast those pieces of rock come flying at you when that hammer's close to you. And yeah, it shattered that glass. It scared the hell out of me. So you'll probably see in a link in the description, or if I have a chance to make the video, I'll put one up ahead or up on the top of the screen here, to me repairing that damage, putting in a new windshield. But suffice it to say, the rock broke, and I was able to start working on the road and making progress. And as you can see in this image, I got over that wall, that one ledge I was pointing to before, and I was able to go up the hill and hit a lot of dirt, and I was able to bring down enough material that I had access to getting up closer to the top. Now, I'm not going to say this is the end of my stress, but what I would like to say is this is the point in the project where I started to breathe a sigh of relief. I could see light at the end of the tunnel, or rather at the top of the hill, and I knew that I was hitting softer material and that I was going to be able to get to the top. And as I got closer to the top, and I could see that getting brighter and brighter, I kept getting more and more excited because I knew that I had gotten through the roughest, the hardest part of this job, and the one that scared me the most.
So many times, I start on a project and you forget what it looked like before you did the work. And I just want to document this. I'm getting very close to the top now. From this angle, it doesn't look like it, but from the angle down there, it definitely does.
And of course, for every tree I take out, I have a mountain of brush that has to come out with it. So, what you're not seeing in a lot of these pictures is the limbing of all the trees, the hauling of all the shrubs, and the underbrush. And so I'm going to show you a little of that here in a second. So much of this stuff that you do, it happens in the background. Building a road isn't just cutting into the ground and carving the channel for the road. It's all the tree removal and the debris and smoothing and compacting and hoping to God that you're on target, and then moving all these logs down to the sawmill. This has been a lot of work, and it's not even close to done. But I think one of the things that drives me to do the job as best I can is the hope that someday, when people are looking at it, my kids and my family can say, my dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather built the roads that led into this property. That would just be amazing. Okay, this concludes this section. I'm going to ask you to do what everybody asks you to do. If you've made it this far, would you please hit the like button? If you want to see the rest of this story and you want to see how it unfolds, hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. I remember my good friend Jeff said to me, "Hey, have you made the turn yet?" And I prematurely said yes. But in the next video, you'll get to see me actually make the turn to finish going up this hill.